Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Cook Inlet Tug and Barge, a marine transportation company specializing in harbor services focusing on the Port of Anchorage and the major commercial participants in the Cook Inlet region, providing customers with marine services specifically tailored to their needs.
The National Weather Service.
Happy Thursday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Mike Ottenweller with the National Weather Service. Tonight is May 21st, 2015, and we've got a weather show for you tonight. Quite a few things to talk about. First of all, you can follow online at arh.noaa.gov if you should need any more details on any of the things that we'll discuss this evening. The weather info line is 1-800-472-0391, 24/7 line there. You can find us at weather.gov/Alaska. Also on social media, you can look for us on Facebook at NWS Alaska, and that'll get you the Fairbanks, Juneau, and Anchorage office. You can look for us on Twitter at NWS Alaska, and you can use the hashtag AKwx to get regional information from around the state. And then for this show and previous recordings of this show, as well as a few other segments, you can find us on YouTube. Just use the channel identifier AKwx TV. Let's get into it tonight. You can see our hazards map, rather active. It looks a little bit more ominous than it actually is, but for the eastern portion of the state, it is getting pretty dry and quite a bit of fire danger out there, fire weather danger that is. We have red flag warnings posted pretty much from the Copper River Basin all the way up through Fort Yukon to the Tanana Valley there. And these are for a variety of low relative humidities during the afternoon hours when we have our maximum temperatures. And also we're expecting a little bit stronger southeasterly winds to pick up. So some of these are a combination of relative humidity and winds, and some of them are just for relative humidities. But either way, fire danger is going to be high starting off into the end of the week and then on into the weekend. These advisories are mostly, or warnings, are mostly in effect until late Friday night, but there is a chance that they could be extended on into Saturday. Also for our rivers and our hydrologic outlook, we do have quite a few flood warnings and advisories to talk about. We'll start with our warning up near the Dalton Highway from milepost 394 on the Dalton Highway to Dead Horse. This is in effect until 4:15 p.m. Friday, and that is for water from the Sag River washing out over the highway. So be advised if you're planning to travel up there this weekend that that highway is seeing some significant water over top of it. We also have a flood watch for all areas along the coastal, the Arctic coast. All rivers draining out through those areas are under a flood watch, and that is until Saturday afternoon. And then flood advisory is in effect for the Kapark River until 3:45 p.m. Saturday. And we also have a flood advisory in effect for in-place channel along the Colville River until 2:30 p.m. Saturday. And then finally our advisory near the western portion there of the state, and that one is in effect until Friday as well. If you need any more information on any of these advisories, feel free to go online and you can find the latest on all of those with a little bit more detail than we can get into here on the show. So as for our breakup map, you can see with that warm air that's been pushing up from the south for the past week plus now, we've had many of the rivers open up completely for the southern half of the state. And you can see our advisories and our warnings highlighted. This advisory is the one from the past several days along the Porcupine River, and the warning is in effect near Fort Yukon. And then there's our other ice breaking up along the coastal areas, and that's why the flood watch is in effect for all drainages going through the Arctic coast. And for the latest on those watches and advisories from the River Forecasting Center, you can visit Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center, so that's aprfc.gov. So taking a look at our satellite image tonight, you can see our area of low pressure that Dave discussed yesterday. This is the remnants of Typhoon Dolphin, so it started out well down here into the western Pacific and has worked its way up. We call this recurving when it comes all the way up into here. Kind of unusual for this time of year, but nonetheless it has made its way into the western Aleutians and has brought storm force winds to areas like Shimia, just to the west of Atka and Adak, but that storm force front is going to continue to bring some gusty winds through those areas through the evening hours, and then we do expect some stronger winds to wrap around the backside of that as well. We'll talk about that a bit more in detail here in a moment. So watching that one more time, that area of low pressure, that front has moved through Shimia. We had a gust to about 55 miles an hour out there. And then as that warm air continues to stream up and go over this water that's still relatively cool, only in the low 30s as far as water temperatures there over the Bering, we do expect quite a bit of fog to develop in the areas south of St. Lawrence Island along the west coast of the state. Taking a look at the rest of the state now, here we have our stream of moisture that continues to plume up from the North Pacific into southwest Alaska. And with that, just rain showers continuing for much of southwest Alaska. They have seen a bit of dry air move in from the east, or excuse me, from the west towards the east, and that has allowed things to turn a little bit more showery. The heaviest rain now is on the south side of the Alaska Peninsula, but nonetheless this moisture tap has been in effect now for over a week, and I think some people out in the southwest are probably ready to see a few more breaks in the sunshine and the end to the rain. And we will get into that as we talk about our surface maps for the next couple days. Out over the eastern half of the state, you can see clear skies have been the rule, and the boundary of those clouds and that clear sky is right over south central, so folks here in Anchorage have probably been seeing a mix between clouds and sun. As this ridge wavers back and forth, that is where that boundary goes, right through south central, and so we're going to keep an eye on exactly where that will fall through the weekend as we discuss the next couple days. Thunderstorms have fired off into northwestern portions of Canada and Yukon territory along higher terrain. Not really expecting a lot of those to drift down to southeast Alaska, so mostly clear skies there with just a little bit of marine stratus hugging the coastline here. Tough to see, but it is hugging the coastline, and as we go into the overnight hours, expect that to produce some patchy fog back into those intercoastal ways. So let's take a look at today's surface map. And you can see there is our remnants of former Typhoon Dolphin down at a low pressure of 974 millibars. Fairly strong low for this time of year, bringing not unusual conditions for the Aleutians, but it is unusual for the middle to the end of May to see winds this strong. So about 55 miles an hour again, and expect those storm force winds to really impact the marine zones through the overnight hours before we start to see this thing eventually wind down tomorrow. It still has a little bit of strengthening yet to do. So fog out in front of that as well, along with plenty of rain associated with that, bringing up moisture from the West Pacific. As we get into southwest Alaska, you can see those showers continue for much of the area, and there again is that heavier rain just on the south side of the Alaska Peninsula. And here we have our weak area of low pressure that's helping to bring some of that moisture up here, but this should continue to dissipate, already up to 1,010 millibars, and that should continue to weaken. A little bit of light precipitation over the northwest coast with some fog over the Arctic coast. And then as we look towards southeast Alaska for this afternoon, we do see those thunderstorms there firing along the higher terrain. High pressure is in control of the eastern half of the state, and that is why we have those red flag warnings out, because it is very dry, and we will start to see the winds increase as that frontal system from the Bering approaches through the weekend. So taking a look at tonight's forecast, you can see here we do have our 970 low now, deepened just a little bit from this afternoon, and we do expect that to continue to advance east and north. It will only make it as far as the Bering Sea, as this ridge of high pressure will keep it from making it all the way into the mainland of Alaska. So don't expect any strong winds or extremely heavy precip to make it all the way this far inland. Do expect that dense fog in effect for the western portion of the mainland and through the eastern Bering as we go into the overnight hours. A little bit of precipitation will continue along the Arctic coast, and then looking out over the Gulf, we do have our high pressure in charge, bringing that little bit of marine stratus just to the inland areas. Thunderstorms should die out over Canada as we go into the overnight hours. We'll lose the daytime heating that's driving those. On into Friday now, we do continue to see a few weak waves move through the west coast, and with those, showers will continue, but these should be much lighter in nature. Potentially a few breaks in the cloud cover, but clouds will probably remain intact for the most part. And then there's our system now down to 968. That'll be its peak tomorrow during the day on Friday, and it continues to bring precip spreading slowly to the east through the central Aleutians. For much of mainland Alaska, Friday will be a rather gorgeous day, sunny and warm for many places, expecting that cloud barrier to be just west of south central Alaska, just west of the Cook Inlet, and again another sunny and dry day for much of the eastern half of the state, with high pressure dominating over the Arctic coast, bringing some patchy fog. As we look into Saturday now, we see a little bit of change as this front finally pushes some moisture associated with that system over southwest Alaska, and this should slide through south central on Saturday, unfortunately bringing some wet weather to the Kenai Peninsula, and likely this is Susitna Valley as we get into Saturday for Memorial Day weekend. We also expect a thermal low. This will be heat generated low from the warmer temperatures on Saturday to develop over mainland Alaska on Saturday afternoon, and with that we do expect those thunderstorms to be able to track their way just a little bit further westward towards the Alcan border and possibly into the areas near Tok and Eagle, and so we'll keep an eye on that as it gets closer in time. Do expect near record high temperatures in the interior for the weekend as that sunny skies continues to produce the very warm air throughout much of the mainland. As we look off towards the Panhandle now, we can see showers will continue to be the rule there, with high pressure out over the Gulf starting to slide off to the south and east, and those showers will stay mainly over interior Canada, but we can't rule out that they could make their way back towards southeast Alaska in the Juneau area. And then our low pressure center over the Bering starts to weaken finally on Saturday down to 982 as it slings a little bit of moisture and a few weather fronts through the central and eastern Aleutians. Taking a look at temperatures now, let's start with southeast Alaska. Another very warm day for many folks down there. 70 degrees was your high in Juneau, and mostly in the 60s and some 50s, a little bit cooler up towards Yakutat, 54 there on the water. Places that had the marine stratus stayed a little bit cooler through the day. Out towards south central Alaska, we saw Valdez come in at 57 with Middleton Island at 50. And Anchorage has topped out this afternoon. Well, didn't top out, but reached 60 degrees as of 4 p.m. Still a chance to climb a little bit higher with our longer days. Kodiak Island was at 49 degrees. As we look up towards the interior for the afternoon for the 4 o'clock temperatures, 69 degrees at Fairbanks with a very warm 86 there at Eagle. For much of the Brooks Range, we saw temperatures between the mid-50s and lower 60s. And then north towards the Arctic coast, temperatures were generally in the mid-40s to low 50s. 41 at Cape Lisburne, 42 at Barrow, and 33 degrees at Nome. As we look towards the Aleutians now, you can see temperatures in southwest Alaska were around 50 degrees at Dillingham, 55 degrees at King Salmon, 51 at Bethel, and over the Aleutians generally in the mid-40s to upper 40s for much of the area out there, with that continual plume of warm southerly air from many of those locations. Looking at tonight's low temperatures now, we have again, pretty warm night for many locations in the upper 40s, mid to upper 40s for much of southeast Alaska, even a few 50s there towards the southern end of the peninsula. As we look towards the mainland, we do see temperatures generally in the low 40s. Again, with clearing skies tonight, we could see temperatures drop a little bit colder on the east side of Anchorage. Warm temperatures again over the interior portion of the state, with lows generally in the low to mid 40s, even upper 40s for some locations over the northeast. Arctic coast, we'll see temperatures generally in the 30s tonight, with the coolest temperatures being along the Seward Peninsula there in the low 30s. For southwest Alaska, expect temperatures around 40 to 45 degrees, and out towards the Aleutians, again, 40 to 45 degrees will be the rule, unless you're out by Shimia where that colder air is working in, 38 degrees for a low. For tomorrow's high temperatures, you can see about upper 60s to low 70s for southeast Alaska. And there's our very warm temperatures over the Copper River Basin and the eastern portion of the state. Eagle coming in at 86. Do expect a warm day for much of south central as well. Highs in the upper 50s to low 60s. And 40 degrees will be the high, mid 40s will be the highs along the Arctic coast, with about upper 40s along the Seward Peninsula. And for southwest Alaska, anywhere between mid 50s to low 60s, with 40s being the general rule of thumb for highs on Friday for the Aleutian chain. Taking a look at flying weather now, you can see we do have just a little pocket of that marine stratus bringing IFR conditions to southeast Alaska near the Queen Charlotte Islands, Haida Gwaii. And as we look towards southwest and out towards the Aleutians with our frontal system, that's where we have our worst conditions for flying. Expect IFR conditions out there with some NVFR just outside of the frontal areas where that southwest flow continues to bring moisture up. So looking at past conditions with the high pressure and control over mainland Alaska, you're going to notice the theme is VFR for all passes. Lake Clark and Merrill visual flight rules. Rainy will also be VFR. Expecting windy to be VFR. We could see the winds on the increase out of the southeast in some of these passes, especially ones that favor that southeast to northwest orientation. But otherwise, as far as sky and visibility, we expect all passes to be visual flight rules. And with that, we'll take a look at our freezing levels now. With that warm air out over the Copper River Basin and eastern Alaska, we do have 10,000 foot freezing levels now. Out over the mainland, we expect between 8,000 and 6,000 feet. And then as you get towards the western portion of the state, it's not until you get into the Bering Strait where you find those freezing levels down to the surface. Out over the western portion of the Aleutians, you'll see that warm air that's being brought up by the remnants of the typhoon, all the way up to 12,000 feet here in the North Pacific. But generally speaking, this warm air will be quickly modified by the cooler water temperatures out over the Bering Sea. Looking at icing now, we do expect above 9,000 feet for much of the eastern Aleutians and for the Bristol Bay area, just light isolated moderate associated with that weak area of low pressure and that continual stream of moisture from the southeast. Slight above 5,000 feet, light isolated moderate out over the central Bering Strait. And then along with our frontal system, we do have a light isolated moderate above 8,000 feet where that warmer air is down to the south. And then as it stretches up towards eastern Russia, we expect above 4,000 feet. And then as some of that colder air wraps around from the northwest, expect just above 3,000 feet, light isolated moderate out over the western Aleutians. Taking a look at the jet stream now, we do see about 135 knots becoming 110 knots, down to 130, and then a sharp curve in the atmosphere associated with that former typhoon, and then about 80 knots trailing off over the northern portion of the state from west to east at about 95 knots. That jet continues to bring warm air up from the North Pacific at 110 knots, and then our high pressure in the Gulf of Alaska has a little bit of jet support going over top of it down into the Baja of California there, supporting the low pressure at about 100 knots. Taking a look at our turbulence chart now, our strongest winds are just to the east of this low pressure, our 9,000 foot winds, not turbulence. 50 to 60 knots coming out of the south to southwest at 9,000 feet. Fairly strong winds there. Over the state, we have pretty light flow with high pressure in charge. And out over the western capes, we have southerly winds at about 30 knots, becoming westerly 20 to 40 knots as you get towards the Arctic coast. And then on over the Gulf of Alaska, coming over this ridge of high pressure, 30 knots, becoming 10, and then back to 30 knots as you get down towards the northwest of the continental United States. Taking a look now at 3,000 foot winds, again, our strongest corridor is here from the south to the north at about 50 knots. And with that sharp bend, you can expect some turbulence in those areas. And then as we look towards the state, very similar pattern as the 9,000 foot winds, light over the state and coming 30 knots, becoming 20 knots over this ridge of high pressure. Taking a look at turbulence then, we do see our worst area of turbulence, our occasional widespread moderate below 9,000 feet in that corridor where we see that sharp bend and those stronger winds. And that is the just occasional widespread moderate. Otherwise, mainly where the winds are interacting with terrain along the west coast below 5,000 feet and up along the Arctic coast below 4,000 feet, light, isolated, moderate. Stay tuned, we'll be back with the marine forecast.
The Wanderers. Welcome to Stargazers. I'm Dean Regas, astronomer from the Cincinnati Observatory.
And I'm James Albury, director of the Kika Silva Plot Planetarium in Gainesville, Florida. Saturn will be at opposition this week, making it bigger and brighter than it's been all year.
That's right, James. So this is a great time to get out there and look for the ringed planet. If you have a telescope, Saturn's rings will look exquisite as they're tipped toward the Earth.
With that being said, we thought this would be a great opportunity to also talk about how the planets got their names.
Plus, we'll show you where to look for the ringed planet. Let's show you. Throughout human history, cultures around the world have made patterns out of the brightest stars. We call these patterns constellations. And the stars that form them appear fixed with respect to each other, gliding in unison through the night sky from east to west.
For most of human history, there was no scientific explanation for what the stars were, so many cultures considered the stars as being divine. The motion of the stars through the sky was so predictable that people could actually tell time based on the position of the stars.
However, there were a few peculiar lights that seemed to move among the stars, appearing in different position each night. And not only would they move, but they would change their direction, their speed, their brightness, and even their color. These lights would even disappear for a while and then reappear.
The strange behavior of these lights prompted many ancient cultures to believe that these wandering stars were greater gods than the fixed stars, and their bizarre motions were messages from the gods expressing their pleasure or displeasure with the doings of man.
Ancient Greek astronomers referred to these wandering stars as asteros planetes, which we've shortened today to planet. We now define a planet as being a relatively large spherical body that orbits a star, in our case, the Sun. Our solar system has 4 rocky planets, 4 gas giant planets, and numerous icy dwarf planets. Given the godly history of the planets, each of the major planets is named after a character in Roman mythology.
For example, Mercury is named after the messenger of the Roman gods. He was known for his speed, and this planet lives up to its namesake. Mercury is traveling over 100,000 miles per hour around the Sun and can complete one orbit in about 88 days.
Venus, the brightest and the most dazzling of the naked eye planets, was named after the Roman goddess of beauty and love. However, its beauty is deceptive. Venus has one of the most hostile planetary environments we know. Its atmosphere is poisonous to us, and its surface temperature alone is hot enough to melt lead.
Mars, the red planet, is special because of its dramatic change in brightness and color. The reddish color of the surface of Mars prompted many cultures to associate this planet with their gods of blood and violence. And every 2 years, Mars's orbit brings the planet close to the Earth, and its brightness and color can change dramatically. It was believed that whenever this happened, war, pestilence, and death were not far behind.
Jupiter is our largest planet and is quite fittingly named after the king of the Roman gods. This planet takes almost 12 years to orbit the Sun, spending almost a year in each of the 12 zodiac constellations. Jupiter currently has 67 moons, and if Jupiter were hollow, you could fit over 1,000 Earths inside it.
Saturn is the last of the naked eye planets. This planet was named after the Roman god of agriculture, who also happened to be Jupiter's father. Saturn is special because it has rings made of billions of pieces of ice, rock, and dust that subsequently make them very easy to see, even with the smallest telescope. Speaking of Saturn, let's set up our sky for 9 p.m. any night this week facing southeast.
To find Saturn, look southeast where you'll see it near the 3 stars at the top of the J-shaped pattern of stars that mark Scorpius the Scorpion. As the night progresses, Saturn rises higher and higher, reaching its highest point in the sky around 1:30 a.m.
So, there you have it. A little background on the wandering stars with a little planetary trivia thrown in for good measure.
And they're all in the sky waiting for you as you keep looking up.
And welcome back from Stargazer. Let's dive into your southeast marine forecast. Looking at Friday afternoon, we're expecting winds out of the south for Lynn Canal at about 10 knots. Seas will generally be about 3 feet. Northwesterly flow for the southern portions of the inner passageways, 3 to 4 foot seas and winds increasing from 10 to 20 knots. Out over the open waters, expect northwest and westerly flow, 20 to 25 knots, and seas on the order of about 7 to 9 feet. On into Saturday now, we're looking for south winds, 20 knots increasing through the day for northern portions of Lynn Canal towards Skagway, and 4 foot seas. Northwesterly flow in 10 to 15 knots down towards the south, and 2 to 3.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Cook Inlet Tug and Barge, a marine transportation company specializing in harbor services focusing on the Port of Anchorage and the major commercial participants in the Cook Inlet region, providing customers with marine services specifically tailored to their needs.